If you have kids and you have money, this is going to be a super helpful conversation for you. Welcome to the Evalesco Healthy, Wealthy and Happy podcast. My name is Jeff and I'll be your host today. And I'm pleased to be joined by Jasmine from Evalesco, a financial advisor. Welcome, Jazz.
Thank you.
And Dwayne Fernandez, who's a senior advisor and partner at our partner business, Principal Edge. Welcome along, Dwayne.
Thanks, Jeff.
Today, we're going to be talking about preparing the kids for money, how to have those conversations. And as a starting point, Dwayne, I guess we're having more discussions with clients and people in general about including kids in money conversations. So, what do you think is driving that increase in conversations, and what are some of the different shapes that those conversations are taking?
Yeah, it's definitely increased more. I think, there's the usual sorts of conversations you have around someone's getting married, someone's getting divorced, or buying a property, and there's usually events that happen, and they're good instigations to have those sorts of conversations. But I think where we're seeing an increase is really around, it's a bit of a recognition of the fact that clients have more money, and so it's coming from more of a broader estate planning context, perhaps, to say, well, our assets are gonna outlive us, and so we really want to have some responsible conversations with our family to help equip them to make better decisions in the future.
Yeah. And what are some of the typical way those conversations go? I guess in your case, you're talking more with the, older generation, the parents.
Yeah.
What are some of the ways those conversations typically?
So, sometimes it can be quite a specific need, where somebody wants advice on a particular aspect, where their children need advice on a particular aspect. And so that's quite a specific kind of area we can help them in, and that's generally a good introduction to us and to what we can do for them. And on occasion there could be a need for more holistic advice as well, and everything in between, basically.
Yeah, great. So we'll dig into some examples of some of those conversations as we go through. So, Jazz, just before we get too far into the detail, I guess we should clear up who are the kids that we're preparing for.
Yeah, well, we either have kids coming in and they're seeking advice on their own investments or looking to invest, or they're kids of parents who are already clients and we've had those discussions and then they've decided they want their kids to understand the basic fundamentals of investing, and that's how they get involved. So it can range from anywhere people in their 20s up to 60s, just depending on the client.
Yeah. Bit unusual to think about people in their 60s as the kids, but we're talking about them in the context of the parents who may be introducing them, or how they can get involved with, I guess, helping their parents and supporting their parents in some of those conversations as well.
Yeah.
So talking about the younger ones, Jazz, to start off with, it's become a fairly big challenge for our industry in terms of being able to assist the younger clients due to the rising cost of advice. So what sort of conversations do you have with the kids of clients, or just younger people as they come in who might be in their 20s or early 30s seeking advice? How can we help people at that age, and how do mum and dad help them as well?
Yeah, it's just making sure they understand the basic fundamentals of investing. But the first thing is making sure they have the cash first, so that they've got the money available there if there are any emergencies, and then looking to invest anything above that. So it's making sure they understand the baseline, have the foundation assets, and then they're able to invest.
So what do you mean by foundation assets?
So it's having the cash to cover at least 3 months worth of expenses, figuring out any goals in the future if they want holidays or any major Europe trips, often with younger kids, what they want to do, making sure they have the cash for that first, and then investing anything else that they've got left over into that, because they need to understand it's for the long term, not just for 1 year. It's for a minimum of 5 years, and making sure it can grow and sit there that way.
And how do you help people in that process when they first come in? If it's often it's a new, first time conversation, how do you help in that regard?
I figure out what their lifestyle expenses are and we go through the budget. And then once that's established, we then set up a bucketing strategy of their cash. So figuring out 3 months worth of expenses, any other goals for a car, holiday, make sure we establish that, and then look to invest the rest of that into the growth assets that way. We also have the conversation around the difference between cash and investing, because a lot of young people think, oh yeah, I'll invest, but they don't understand it can go backwards as well. So it's making sure they understand the risk involved in investing and seeing the graphs to visualize of what can happen with their money, that it can go backwards as well.
Yeah, and I know one of those exercises that you go through is to help them understand what are the different asset classes, what are the different options around investing, and talking about the ups and downs in markets and how that can play out in reality.
Yeah, we have the graph that shows the last 30 years of the different types of asset classes and how they perform. So we show cash and say how it's kind of a straight line but goes up a little bit, and compare it to like US or Aussie shares, as everyone's familiar with, and show the difference. And also the times, say through the GFC or COVID when it dropped, and just showing that if they had invested, say, $10,000, it could have gone backwards then, and making sure they're comfortable with that and familiar before they invest.
Easier to say they're comfortable up front, but often
Yeah.
the
When it
experience
happens.
is a little bit different, isn't it? But
Yeah,
we
yeah.
can have that conversation.
Yeah.
And so just one of the other scenarios, which is pretty common, is where, we'll talk about a few more examples, but where the bank of mum and dad comes into play and they're helping their kids to buy a property. So if you're talking to the kids who are receiving a gift or a loan or a contribution from the parents, what are some of the things that you think about and advise people to think about in that context?
So if they're receiving the gift, it's just making sure that, firstly, if they have any goals with this gift, most people, especially if they're young, they then say, I'm receiving this money, great, I'm going to upgrade my car, or I'm going to go on a major holiday. So just figuring out that first is the baseline to everything, and then working out what they are wanting to invest and making sure that money can sit there for 5 to 7 years. Because often they'll want to invest it, but then, actually they need it in 2 years because they want to upsize their house as a result of receiving the inheritance. So it's making sure we really do a deep dive into their goals first to work that out, to then establish what strategies we can use afterwards.
Yeah. And I think coming back to what you were saying earlier, it's about, even when you get a gift, you want to have your own fundamentals in place and have good habits and sort of have your own house in order too, to maximize the benefit of that gift, isn't it? So it's not, I guess if you have bad habits, then that can just exacerbate some of those bad habits. But you get those fundamentals in place, it can be a really good place to kickstart financial security.
Yeah, it really is.
So you guys had a really great example recently where the two of you have worked together with a family to assist with some multi-generational advice. So Dwayne, starting with you I guess introduced the client, the son, to Jazz, but can you maybe sort of give us a bit of background on the clients and how providing advice to their son came about in the conversation?
Yeah, sure. So it was really important to mum and dad in this scenario where they wanted to help their children, and that's a really important goal of theirs. And so that was beyond just helping them with money, but helping them to develop their own understanding of finances. Effectively, it's not something that's taught in school. You don't learn about these things, and so having a bit of a foundational educational element, I think, was really important to them. And then, building on that with some good disciplines around savings, around investing, with the long-term goal really of building out their financial skills effectively.
So for them, it was much more than just giving them some money and going, do your best. It was about, I guess, helping lay those foundations as well.
Exactly, and it's the first step of a much longer conversation, hopefully, to try to engage with the kids. These are quite young kids in that example, but really help them to engage with us, hopefully, but just to engage with the process to help them develop those skills and help them in the future.
And my understanding is that the son, who in this case you introduced to Jazz, had also saved a bit of money off his own bat and was working and doing some good stuff on his own.
Yeah, so he's already started that sort of journey, which is great, and just help to support that, and where the parents can help and help to encourage that sort of behaviour, they will do that, and so that's really great. And so getting those foundations in place is what Jazz is going to help with, and then where the family might build on that is hopefully to encourage them to save more and to build on those disciplines.
Yeah. So Jazz, how did you approach the conversations with the son, and how are you able to support him?
So I started it a bit different, just asking him what he's expecting out of this and how he thinks an advisor acts, because knowing he's a young person, he probably isn't familiar with how it all works. And he was saying he just wants to really do a deep dive into investing and the principles and the different types of assets. So we ended up going through a risk profile in the meeting to then go through all the questions and how he feels because the risk profile includes questions of like, how would you feel if your investment went down by 20%? And would you leave it for 12 months, or would you seek advice or sell? well. And that was really interesting. He said it worked really well for him to understand all the different types of risk profiling and how it works for each section, because he hadn't really thought about it that way. So we just kind of went through that with him, as well as understanding the different investment types of assets that are there, like the passive and the aggressive ones and active, and went through all those different types of options just to enhance his understanding of investing, just the basic principles at the start.
So very much an educational process to kick it off.
Yeah.
And as we talked about, he had some, good habits in place, and then he was saving some money, so he kind of had something to work with. And then it was about educating him to some of the options. And then, so what are some of the steps that are now being put in place, or he's doing as a result of those conversations?
Yeah, we're setting up an investment plan. He's currently going on a sabbatical though, so we're not doing a regular savings plan, but we talked about that when he goes back to work and then establishes that cash flow, we'd look to invest that. But at the moment, it's just an investment plan so he can understand how it works and the performance of the funds. So he'll be able to log in on an app on his phone and see how it works in a little graph. And I told him to let me know if he's got any questions on how it's performing or how it goes, because really it's just him understanding that it's different to a bank account and it's going to go backwards or forwards, but it'll change every day.
Yeah, so I think the really valuable aspect there is for the child to have somebody to call and have an advisor that they can speak to if their circumstances change, if they need money, if they want to have more money to invest, or the markets change, and how should they be reacting to those. And having someone to speak to is the real valuable thing. And I think, they can go off and they can invest in crypto and do other things like that. But having somebody to speak to and having those disciplines in place and the structures in place is really what mum and dad are after. And hopefully there's value in that for the child as well.
Yeah, and it's just helping them train them if they're wanting a really aggressive risk profile in terms of the understanding of if it was to underperform, that's what would go backwards, essentially. So it's just helping them train through that section.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the great thing in this scenario is it helps them get off on the right foot. So if you establish those good habits and a good understanding early, then it makes, he can choose to go more aggressive down the track if he likes, but he's got that foundation to know why he's doing that and what the implications of that might be. So.
Yeah. And I think the more education you get, the more involved you get in that conversation, the better the decision making is. And so, you may not need to invest in crypto to achieve what you're trying to achieve, right? And so I think that becomes clearer as you have that conversation.
Yeah. No, that's great. It's a really good example of, we talk a lot about that intergenerational advice, but this is a really practical example of how, it's independent advice to the son as well, because it's his own money that he's saved, but it's also helping to support the family values and what they see as valuable in the advice process.
Yeah, and it's purposefully separated from me and from the dad, and so you guys can have your own conversation, and it doesn't need to involve mum and dad really, which is also important, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good call out as well. There's lots of people talk about, the kids coming through don't necessarily want to deal with their parents' advisor.
Yeah.
And, in this case, I'm sure, you're a top bloke, Dwayne, so he would have been more than happy to talk to you, but, maybe talking to Jazz, who's closer in age and, separated from the parents, maybe that's a more comfortable conversation.
I think so. I think that's a valuable thing. And just having a different person as well, I think, is also important. Just not having the same person involved in every discussion in that conversation, I think, has value. And so that's the reason that Jazz is involved. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So, Dwayne, you specialise in working with wealthy families, often in a family office capacity. So you've got many really good examples of successfully bringing the next generation into conversations. So can you share some of those and unpack some of those?
Yeah, sure. So again, it's not one conversation. So I think it's the start of a dialogue over, many, many years. Where we've seen it most commonly initiate is where the adult children will come to mum and dad's review meeting. And that's a really, really powerful thing where mum and dad are comfortable with that, obviously. We're seeing cognition become a much bigger issue as people age. And so we're trying to get ahead of that as best we can. And so talking to people in their 60s and 70s to say, look, who do you want at the table if something happens to you? And, there's legal documents that sit behind that, but, actually, who do you actually want at the table? And let's bring them to the table and let's start having that conversation with them today. And so that'll be kids attending, talking about mum and dad. So that's a little bit different.
Yeah.
the other occasion that we sort of have for some of our family office clients is to have a family meeting to just sit down and say, look, this is the family's position. That might be the first time that they've had that discussion, which is also interesting.
Yeah.
But have a conversation around, look, this is what the family has. And this is what we're trying to achieve, and we'd like you to contribute to that. You're obviously going to be a decision maker in this in the future. Maybe not today, which is fine, but in the future you might have a role to play, and helping them to get ready for that, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one in terms of, again, coming back to the terminology, intergenerational wealth. It's like these are families who've got significant wealth, which they're planning for, and it should last through generations. So it will have to be handed over to someone else to be making those decisions. And that's a big step, and particularly a big step if it's done, cold in the event of death or an estate trigger, isn't it?
That's usually how it happens, right? Something happens, and then you're scrambling to deal with it at a time of heightened sort of emotional fragility, and so it's much better to do that before anything happens, and you can plan for that. Some people are not comfortable with that, of course, but I think getting everybody in the room getting comfortable with it is a much better outcome in the long term.
I think that's something that you've experienced where that can happen over time as well. So you might raise it as an idea, but the parents might not be comfortable at that point in time, but it's okay. Well, let's talk about when it is the right time, and then we can sort of jump into that.
Yeah, exactly right. We had a meeting recently that's probably been 2 years in the making, and so it's taken a long time to get everyone comfortable with the idea of having that meeting and what would be on the agenda for such a meeting. Do you talk about dollars and cents, or do you just talk about concepts? And so that conversation took a long time, and then we had the meeting, and it worked out really well.
And where did you land on that one? Did you talk dollars and cents in detail?
We did in the end, because everyone was, mum and dad were comfortable with that, and so that's the main thing, really, is to be comfortable about that. There's lots of fear around that decision, I think, and so we addressed those and talked about those and made sure everyone in the room was comfortable about that before introducing the children to that concept. And then we're going to build on that and hopefully start to involve them in maybe some decision making in the future, in the near future.
And what was the kids' response to those conversations?
It was really positive. Some of the fear that was around that was, will this serve as a disincentive? Will it be create a sense of entitlement, things like that, which are real fears, and they're important to recognise and address. That's not been my experience of that, by the way. And so generally speaking, when we've done that, it's been received really positively, and received with the intent that we're trying to position, right? Which is trying to embed family values around money whilst you're still alive, whilst you're still able to have those discussions to help them in the future. And, it helps them now. So if they've got questions around, well, what are we doing here? They can talk to mum and dad about that. They're not passed away, right? And so that's a really powerful thing, I think. And it's a great opportunity, I think, for those families to start having those conversations today and not kicking the can down the road for when something happens.
Yeah. So it's a good point to touch on. I think that concern around, the entitlement or spoiling the kids by passing money on or having those conversations. So you talked about a few things there about instilling those family values, having those conversations while they're still around. I imagine a lot of the kids coming in to those conversations know that the family's wealthy, but sometimes maybe not quite as wealthy as what they are, or it might be a little bit different. But is there anything that you think the parents have done particularly well in those scenarios, or that you think you've contributed to the process, which has helped that those positive outcomes that you said have been your experience?
Yeah, I think it's about positioning it as an opportunity to learn and to contribute to the family's wealth and what you're able to achieve from that point on, and so every family is different, all the dynamics are always different, and so it's an opportunity, I think, to just get everyone in the same room and say, look guys, this is where things are at, and you're a part of this, and we want you to be more of a part of it than you have been potentially, and help guide some of the decision making in the future if that's part of the family's wishes, or at least to open the veil a little bit and to show you this is what it currently looks like. And in my view, I think being upfront is the best way to do it. But I've seen that done differently, and it can work. But having a conversation is better than not having a conversation.
100%. And Jazz, in the scenario we were talking about before, where you spoke to the son, did he have any in that conversation, did there come up around, the wealth of the family or, that positioning, or was it more about his own scenario in the first instance and that was how that was positioned?
It didn't come up about his family or the wealth of the family. It was all about his position and where his assets are and what he's looking for, because it was mainly just focusing on his situation, nothing to do with the parents, just to have it as a different scenario for him, especially because he's a younger client. We didn't really need to bother about the parents and what they're doing.
I think that's an interesting one in terms of, again, we've talked about this a number of times already, so maybe I'm at risk of repeating ourselves, but that positioning for him as well, that he's being able to contribute something himself and build something for himself and do something independently, sets him up well from that, to alleviate some of that entitlement or potential entitlement if he's not doing anything and just waiting for this, chunk of cash to land in his lap.
Yeah, it's really important, particularly for younger kids. It's like that's key, right? Is getting those foundations in place so you can have your own life, you can live your own journey, family can support you if that's on the table. But you've got to do it yourself, right?
Yeah. So we just talked about the importance of having those conversations, and for the three of us, that's pretty easy because we talk about money all day, every day, and that's what we get paid to do. But for a lot of people, it's still a taboo subject. So are there any tips that you can think of to remove some of that stigma and to help start those conversations earlier, Jazz, in your experience?
It's more just figuring out what their goals are and asking them what they're doing with their cash. If some clients don't, the parent or both the husband and wife don't even know what's in each other's bank accounts. So it's first figuring out what they're doing with their cash and see if they understand what's happening or how it's being managed and what their values are, like their family values, what they think they should have, and just more starting the whole discussion to then go from there and figure out what they're aiming to achieve. Because often if they come into meetings, they haven't discussed it before, aren't even aware of what they've got. So it's just more starting the entire conversation.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. It's, thinking about money as a tool to help them achieve their goals and live to the values that they see as important, as opposed to having money as this, thing over here that's just different or special or scary or whatever it might be. So it's, how does it fit into the overall strategy? Are you doing any tips or things that you've seen work particularly well?
Yeah, look, I think there is some fear behind some of those conversations, and how are they going to respond to this? Is it going to go badly? You've got to recognize those fears, I think, and in some cases it may not be the best thing to do, right? Like it's not every family dynamic is ideal, right?
Yeah.
And so there's some circumstances where maybe you don't have that conversation, but by and large, I think the right approach is to say, look, let's talk about it. And there is a significant amount of money here, or that there's a pool of money here, and this is what we're thinking. This is what our estate plan. The estate plan often is a good segue for that conversation. It's a good opportunity when you've just done your will or something, or just about to look at your will, to say, look, guys, this is what we're thinking about. This is the role that we want you to play as an executor or trustee potentially, and explain what that means, which most people don't know what that means. And use that as an opportunity to kind of segue into family wealth and conversations around money, which is a bit of an easier segue because it kind of makes sense. Because, okay, you can kind of understand why I'm at that meeting, where in some other contexts you may not. And so I think that's the best way to do it, is to do it off the back of an estate conversation, really gentle. Don't have to talk about dollars and cents if you don't want, but talk about the roles that the kids might play in the future and what it might mean for them in the future.
Fantastic. Yeah. I think that's a good place to wrap up. Thank you both for sharing your insights. If you're listening at home and you're thinking about, you would like to approach some of these conversations, or you think it's the right time for you to start thinking about it, and you would like some support, please reach out to Jazz or Dwayne or myself, and we would be pleased to help you through that conversation, because sometimes having an independent person can be valuable as well. So thanks, guys, and thanks for listening at home.
Thanks.
Thank you.